Now, when we get into this wants category, growing and growing and growing, I'll give you a definition here in a few slides down, we end up with something called debt. That we are so challenged in our society to live according to somebody else's standard or expectations of other people that we say, I've got to get that, and I don't have the money for it right now. And it's just too easy in our culture, as we'll illustrate, to get into debt. So let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, debt is considered slavery from God's point of view. And he said it very specifically in Proverbs. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. You say, I'm not a slave. I go where I want to. I buy what I want to. I spend what I want to. I sleep where I want to. I vacation where I want to. But what do you do when that notice comes at the 15th of the month? Try to ignore that. It is true, when we are a debtor, we are a slave to the lender. Debt is considered slavery. Debt is considered, secondly, a curse. Now, this is a rather long passage, but I want you to just see what phrases hit you. I have a couple of them highlighted or underlined in here. But this is when God was setting up the economy of Israel. And he said, I'm going to give you a system to work. If you do, this will happen. If you don't, this will happen. Listen to these verses. Deuteronomy 28 to Israel. If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord God will set you high above all the nations on the earth. He wanted them to be an example. How you live for Jehovah God and how he will take care of you and how you could become a blessing to the nations. Isn't that one of your titles, Dick? Yeah. He said, now if you do that, that will happen. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. Jumping down to verse 12. The Lord will open the heavens, storehouse of his bounty, send rain on your land, bless all the work of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. He said, if you follow what I have set up, you will become a lending nation. And it goes on. However, if you do not do this, obey the Lord your God, do not carefully follow his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. What curses? The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. Now, not getting political, but which kind of nation are we today? And in my Sunday class, I asked, who owns the U.S.? And 3 people said in unison, thank you very much, China, for the recording, okay? Because we have gone from a lending nation, though we still give a lot of money away, to a debtor nation, because we're not following it, a la Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the way the world is doing finances. Because we get away from the blessing side and get over to the penalty side in God's design for the economy. Further, debt presumes upon tomorrow. James has it pretty straightforward, as most of the book of James is. Listen to you who say today, tomorrow, go here, go there, spend a year there, business, make money. You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we'll live, we'll do this, we'll do that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. When I read this passage, I think about 2007, 2008, and the years leading up to it. What were we presuming on? One, that our houses will always appreciate. We lived in California. They were appreciating 10, 20, 30% a year. This could go on forever because we've got people moving into California and they're going to buy our house after it went up $50,000 in a year and we'll get a bigger house. We just presumed upon that. Secondly, we presumed the stock market was always going to increase. We presumed that we would always have a good job and if we lost that job, we could get another job that would pay more. The presumption was incredible, and we found out what it is to fall off that arrogant precipice, presuming upon tomorrow. It even gets more serious, and it's in place today. May deny future opportunities. What does that mean? It is operating in our society in a couple ways right now that come to my mind. We all read the statistics coming out on the housing market. And there's always a little bright spark of hope and light. Housing is getting better. Housing is getting better. There's more new construction and more sale of previously owned homes. However, it never really gets momentum. And people who've dug into it said one of the reasons is student loan debt. If I graduated from college 2, 3, 4 years ago, and I came out with $40, $50, $80, $100,000 debt, I get married, I go as a young couple to the bank, and we want to buy a home. Well, how much do you make? Well, I make 42, and my wife makes, 52, or whatever the numbers are. And do you have any debt? Well, not except my student loans. Well, how much are your student loans? Well, that's $100,000. Well, you don't qualify. That's one place it's coming in. The other place, and this is interesting because where we live, we're in a college community, development officers going out to alumni, and they say, as an alumni, you have a job now, and you're out, you're trained, and you're benefited from our degree. Well, how about giving back to the college? And here's what the development people are hearing. Giving back? I send my $300 every month to the college. But that's just paying off your debt. That's not benefiting the college. So this, debt and what it does in denying future opportunities, or there's even one more, Dick, and I'm sure you've had conversations about this. If a young person wants to go into full-time ministry, and especially cross-cultural international ministry, and you go to a mission board, and if I'm not right on this, shake your head, but if you go to a mission board and you say, we'd like to go and we'd apply to ABC Mission, and you're going to have to raise your funds. Do you have any debt? And they say, well, we got $80,000, combined in school debt. I think the answer is, at most places, pay off your school debt and then come back and talk to us, because you cannot raise funds, get to the mission field where you have no opportunity to make any more money and ever pay off your student debt. Do it before you go. So there are huge implications of affecting the future, denying future opportunity. Now, debt is simply a symptom of overspending and undersaving. It's a math problem. So much comes in, so much goes out, and if you get on the negative side, in the red, as we say, that is called debt. When you do your balance sheet that you'll get on the way out, you will see whether you are overspending and undersaving. You will come up with a negative figure on that bottom right side of the columns. Here's some sad statistics in our society right now. Only 49% of Americans could cover 1 month of expenses if they lost their paycheck. 30 days out, and they're broke. Now, the Bible doesn't say to borrow or not borrow. We'll talk about it here a little bit more, but I do want to give this book to you, a title on the last line there, Decision Making and the Will of God. A man by the name of Friesen wrote this good book, and the essence of it is that we need sanctified wisdom where God does not specifically tell us yes or no on something. Sanctified wisdom. Learning what we can from the Word of God, learning just what is common sense, putting them together in sanctified wisdom, decision-making, and the will of God by Friesen, a Multnomah volume. Debt is a symptom of overspending, undersaving. Another illustration, on average, most families in the U.S. spend 103% of their income, and I've seen it as high as 110%. That is called debt, spending more than you earn. When we did the earning lesson, we said what God has given you through earning is what God gives you to live on. But because of this needs, wants, tension that we all live in, we want, God says, I'll supply your needs. Then we get up in the 100 and over % of what we have as our income. That's how we get in debt. The average person is 3 weeks from bankruptcy, little or no money saved, significant debt, totally dependent on next week's paycheck to keep afloat, just living day to day with no reserve, nothing to handle emergencies. This chart is pretty small, but let me just explain it quickly. It's a chart of savings rate in the United States from 1950 and goes up to 2020. You can see we're still building the chart. The gray vertical lines are recessions. Like the last one there is the 2007-2008 recession. The blue zigzag line is the savings rate. That is the other side of the page from the debt rate. You can see if a nation, a culture is in debt or not by how they're doing on savings. Just before the 2007-2008, you can see that the savings rate was down under 1%. I saw some charts that had it at a negative rate. Even with people who were saving, there were so many people who were spending that it was a negative savings rate. You will observe that in the gray lines, where we get scared in a recession, you can see that savings goes up. But how long does it last? Not very long, because we're addicted to consumption. We're subject to marketing. And you can see 07, 08, as serious as that was, called some recession, the Great Recession, whatever, you can see that we're now, again, the savings rate is going down because we just cannot do without our stuff beyond what we have resources to buy. When a person is overspending and undersaving, the result is debt. Now, the banks will say debt is a tool for the consumer. And with all due apology to any bankers here or who may listen to this, I began in banking, and I understand that banking is a business to make money. Okay? Debt is not a tool for the consumer, but for the banks to make money for their shareholders and their owners. Though that message will come through, you come get a loan. That is a tool to get the new whiz-bang that you do not have. We will give you the tool to do that. The tool is debt. A person who is in debt is a slave, is a message from God. In Hybel's book that I referred to last week, he has just a good explanation of this. Debt comes from wanting more than God's current provision for your life and arranging other ways to get it. That is the opposite of contentment. Paul said, I have learned to be content in whatever my financial situation, plenty or want. Well, we're not content, and we say, I have a credit card to take care of it. We'll talk about those in a minute as well. Now, when to borrow wisely? One, when you can purchase an asset that is likely to appreciate. That is getting more difficult in our culture to identify. During the last 50 years, and somebody said in the last class that I taught and asked this question, what appreciates in our society? Somebody said, houses. Well, need to take a look at the demographics of what's going on in our culture with the boomer generation of 82,000 people. The next generation is 82 million people. The next generation is 38 million people that will need housing. And that, by the way, little aside, is because of 40 million abortions that have taken place. So it dropped our generation from 80 to under 40 that are going to need houses. And we saw this probably more in California than here, of shopping centers that are closed and schools that are closing because the demand is going to go down. So I'm not certain that houses are even an appreciating item, asset, commodity going forward. But if you can find an asset that's likely to appreciate, that would be the first guideline. Secondly, when the value of the item exceeds the loan. What that means is I could sell it today and be out from under that debt and no longer be a slave. And there are few things that we buy, and the worst illustration will come up in a moment, that we could sell it after we buy it and clear the debt on it. More and more difficult. One of the worst illustrations is a car. And we'll talk more about car in a minute. But if you go buy a new car, as soon as you cross the sidewalk to the street, you just gave up 17% of what you paid. Let's say you pay $30,000 for a car. You drive across the sidewalk, you just gave up $5,100. If the person's there waiting to buy your car, they're buying a used car, and you just dropped it. So I heard an ad last week from a Tulsa radio station, and here was the offer, the enticement. Come to, ABC, car lot. We will give you a better car at a lower payment. Don't worry if it's not paid for. We will fold that in, and we will pay your license taxes and fees, and you'll have a lower payment. Now, just think, what did they not say? Yes, thank you, Nancy. How long that loan is going to be. But the enticements out there that we fall trapped to, are so cunning and diabolic along the way, okay? When the payments don't stress the family budget. I was driving along in North San Diego County between appointments when I was doing donor work out there and donor development work, and there was a call came into Dave Ramsey radio station. And this guy said, my wife and I are having a financial argument, and she said, call Dave Ramsey and he'll settle it for us. So he said, okay, what's the deal? He said, I want to buy a brand new full dress Harley motorcycle and my wife doesn't want me to do that. So he goes, okay, let me, just give me some details. How much does a brand new full dress Harley cost? I don't know, $38,000, whatever the number was. And he said, okay, second question, how much do you make a year? And the guy said, I think last year it was right between like 970,000 or $1 million. I forget which it was. Well, Dave Ramsey thinking, okay, that's an exceptional year. I'll ask him, how much next year? So how much are you going to make next year? Oh, the way things are going, probably 1.2 million. He goes, buy the bike. What's $38,000? I mean, you want that? It doesn't stress the family budget. But this is an important one, and I will confess, once I went and bought a new car and didn't tell Ray about it. I learned my lesson. I learned a lesson from God. You assumed Ray, but I learned my lesson, Find out what God wants you to drive, and it'll get you there fine. We'll talk about that.